Warm welcome to everybody. This is Frequently Answered Friday, a session where a question comes through to me from an agent in the course of the week. And most of the time, these particular questions may appear to be fairly simple. However, there are so many times when these particular questions needs to be answered to a variety and a large number of agents. So, what was the question that actually was asked to me this particular week? And I thought, let me share this with you. So, Stuart, I have a buyer that's interested in a certain property. However, that property is listed with another agent. What do I do? And I thought that's an absolute fantastic one because you're building up relationships with your buyers as you're going through and showing them properties. And ultimately, what happens is your buyer is also doing all of the searches and they're looking out to see what can they actually find in this particular environment. So they're going onto the different portals and they're actually seeing certain listings. Come back to you, Stuart, I'd like to view this particular property. What do you do? So there's a couple of little things that I want to share with you because so many times the properties that are listed on the actual portals may in fact be an open mandate. And if you fall into that trap of just contacting that agent, taking the easy route, ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to share 50% of your commission with an open mandated property. So let's take a couple little steps to find out so that you can secure that commission and get the most out of it. So, step number one, you need to establish if that particular property has a sole, an exclusive mandate, or if it has an open mandate. How do we do that? Well, the great thing with it is you can actually view the property. If you are very familiar with the properties in your suburb, you should be able to recognize, hey, wait a minute, I've actually walked past that property. I recognize it's in this street, this particular address. Or the address may even be actually displayed on any of the portals. Or it could be something where your buyer has driven past the property, and all you need to do is ask him for the address and then do a little bit of research. I always recommend start by giving the seller a call. You can either just drive to the house or alternatively just giving them a call and saying, hey, it's real estate agent, and I just want to find out from yourself. I see your property's on the market. Are you under mandate with anybody? Yes or no? And they will actually come back and say, well, no, we don't have any kind of sole mandate. We're actually pretty open to any agencies working on it. Well, fantastic, Mr. Seller. Well, I've actually got a buyer that's interested in your property. Can I set up an appointment? So, step number one, get hold of the seller. Have a conversation with the seller to find out if that property is an open mandate or if it is a sole mandate. So if it's an open mandate, move straight into the script of saying, I have a buyer, I'd like to set up an appointment. When can we actually come through? And now, just bearing in mind, you need to get some form of open mandate confirmation with that particular seller so that you can just confirm the actual listing price as well as the actual commission that will be paid. If the scenario turns in that, no, well, we've actually got a sole mandate and we're working with Joe from XYZ real estate company. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. I always add this little element into it and I ask them, well, perfect. I will contact Joe. I've actually got his details. We are quite familiar with each other. But could you confirm when is the mandate going to expire? When is that mandate going to expire? Now, this really sets you up that your buyer may walk through that property and not really like the property. But if you know when that mandate expires, you can actually have that conversation with them on that expiry date to say, hey, I spoke to you about 2, 3 weeks ago. You mentioned your mandate expired. I did bring someone. They weren't really interested, but I'd like to actually take the opportunity to see how I can assist you in selling your property. So it just gives you that expiry date on that property. A lot of agents, they don't go down that route of renewing any form of mandate. So, step number one, contact the seller. Identify if it's an open mandate. If it is, set the appointment. If it is a closed mandate, then Go forward and get the details of that particular agent. The second is make contact with that particular agent. Give them a call and say, hey, I have a buyer that's interested in your property. Now, I believe that you've got it mandated. Well, I'm assuming that you've actually got it mandated. Is there any specific terms or conditions of that mandate? Will you allow me to bring a buyer? But more importantly, will you be open to sharing on commissions? And it's very important that you make sure that you have the conversation with regards to sharing of the commission. Many times, if you just take a buyer through without having that negotiation, because that property is mandated to that agent could give you 10% as a referral. And that's going to really hurt you because that's going to not be something that's going to feel great inside of you. So have the conversation and just say, hey, I see you've actually got the mandate. I do have an interested buyer in the actual property. Are you opening to sharing the property? Yes or no? If they say no, hold back and see if you can work your buyer through to the expiry date of that mandate. If they say yes, say, look, I want to confirm like a 50-50 share. And if they say yes, get that in writing. It is very, very important. Make sure that you get that in writing from that particular agent. You can do it on a WhatsApp, do it on an email, get it on a messenger. Don't just have it as something that is verbal. That will go through to litigation. He said, she said, and you could actually end up in a bit of an uncomfortable fight. So get that confirmation in writing and then follow up with setting up those appointments. Now, when you've actually got that confirmation, what you must remember, it's not your listing. This listing belongs to that agency and it is under that particular agent. So there are going to be certain terms and conditions that that agent has dealt with and negotiated with their seller. So for instance, if they've only negotiated that viewings will only happen on a Saturday morning, don't try and say, well, my buyer is only available on a Thursday. We need to bring him in on a Thursday. Remember, you're now becoming a buyer's agent. You have no control over those negotiations that have occurred with that particular seller and agency. So you need to make sure that you actually abide by the mandate terms and conditions. If they say viewings are only on a Saturday morning, you go back to your buyer and say, we can only view on a Saturday morning from this time to this time. And you actually work in conjunction with that. Now, there are some rare occasions where the seller might say, no, I'm not comfortable having another outside agent work with you on this property. I'm only happy that you work with it. So, on very rare occasions, the seller may block outside agents. Now, in my years of being in real estate, I've never experienced that. And that's why I say it is a rare occasion. But if it does happen, what do you do in that situation? Well, in that particular situation, what you can do is then take it to the next level and say to that particular agent, well, your seller is saying no, and you've seen that particular confirmation. Could we set up some form of referral where I will refer my buyer through you onto that property to actually then see if they can view that property? Now, referrals can be extremely dangerous because you are handing over your particular buyer. So you need to get some form of referral agreement in place and stipulate that it is only for that property. Now, there are times where that particular agent will take them to a variety of other properties, and that will become quite a contentious issue and quite difficult to try and maintain because, well, it's not your listing. It's not something that you've control over and you're handing over that buyer into a public domain. So you try and get some form of referral to secure yourself on that particular listing. And what I would always suggest, keep that strong relationship with that buyer. So once they've viewed, immediately go to them. Say, hey, what did you think of the viewing? What did you think of the property? Was there anything? Are you interested in putting an offer? Because I can work with the seller and we can try and negotiate so that you can get your referral. Ultimately, what you want to do is you want to prevent you giving that buyer to that agent and they start taking that buyer to other properties. So How do we actually work around that? If you're not allowed to go in, you need to make sure that you have backup properties to actually show them. So even though they might be liking this particular property, what they're telling you, they like the area, they like the location where the property is based, they like the condition of the photos and possibly videos that they've seen, but they don't like the property just yet. They like all those other factors. The one factor that they haven't confirmed on is the emotional connection to that property. They may walk in and just not feel that emotional connection and walk out and say everything was fantastic, but that's just not that. But what they have told you, that's the location that we're wanting to buy, and that's the type of house that we're wanting to look in. So ultimately, when you do get a buyer that would like to look at a property that is listed with a specific agency that's mandated, you need to now go and find yourself 2 or 3 other properties that you can have control over in that particular suburb or location that is similar to that particular property, so that if you do get the opportunity to take them through, you can then immediately say, right, well, I've got that property and I have got 2 or 3 other properties, and you quickly take them around all those properties so that you can actually give them an array of properties. And remember, one of those array of properties could be mandated to you, which ultimately means that you can then fully sell that particular property and ultimately close with a full commission of 100% instead of a shared commission. So these are the processes to actually go through. You have a buyer, they're interested in another listing that belongs to another agent. Step number 1, identify if it's an open or closed mandate, sole mandate. If it's an open mandate, set up the appointment directly and go in for the kill. If it's a sole and exclusive or a sole mandate, contact that agent. Start doing those negotiations with that agent to see if you can actually share that particular property with them. Then make sure that you do respect the terms and conditions of that mandate agreement. And throughout this process, it is so important that you remain professional. It is so important that you remain professional throughout these discussions with the other agency as well as with that particular seller. There are agencies that will only give you a 20 or 30% commission split. They won't do a 50-50. Be professional in that manner. If it's something where it is a almost secured deal, something where they'll only give you 30%, but you know that your buyer is going to put an offer on that property, sometimes taking that 30%, you can try and negotiate to get it higher. But rather, for me, I would take that 30%, else that buyer will go directly to them and you'll get a 0%. But the big thing is negotiations and seeing how you can work through that. I've always said to my particular agencies that I've worked with, whatever listings I have, I will share with you 50-50, and I make it as an open level agreement. Any listings that you have, we go 50-50. And ultimately, you start building those relationships with those outside agencies so that you're not just that fresh newbie. You're coming in and you're able to secure that 50% commission, because 50% is better than 0%. So this was just a very simple overview to help you through this particular process. So I want to now open it up to the actual floor and find out from anybody, as so many people have actually come into the room, which is absolutely fantastic. I want to find out from anybody if you've got any questions. I did see a few things pop up on the actual chat box, and I wanted to find out, Audrey, I'm here for the frequently answered questions. Absolutely. As you can see on the screen somewhere over here, it's one of the screens. I'll just do that, makes it easier. You'll see it as labeled. It's frequently answered questions. So, Rhoda, can't you view with the buyer as a companion since the seller doesn't want to have you as an agent? Yes, you can. But what you need to do is you need to make sure of those communications and agreements negotiated with that listing agent. You can take them through, but they can take the entire deal because they hold that particular mandate. Remember, if they're at that viewing, at that particular property, they actually can become the effective cause. The effective cause is when you walk into the property and you introduce that particular buyer to the property. Because they've got the mandate, it will override yourself. So make sure that you've got your commission negotiated in writing before you take them through. And don't ever hand your buyer over and let some other seller or some other agent take them through, because they will, in effect, they will get the effective cause and they will get the commission. Not a good idea to go ahead and do that.